So I want you to imagine a presentation slide, but like a very specific kind of slide.
Okay.
It's incredibly minimalist, like stark academic vibes, pure white background, zero gradients, absolutely no 3D graphics or drop shadows, just flat data.
Right. Keeping it strictly to the facts.
Exactly. And on this white background, there's this thick, deep navy blue line, and it is just rocketing upwards. It represents a region's gross domestic product literally doubling.
Which, usually looks like a massive success story.
Yeah, exactly. But right next to that triumphant blue line, there are these three fractured cold gray lines trending aggressively downwards.
All right.
And those represent education, employment, and the environment. And hovering over all of this is a giant dark red question mark.
It's such a powerful visual. It really sets the tone for what we're looking at today.
It really does, because that slide is the cover of a custom 15-page academic deep dive that we're going to unpack for you today.
And the title of that presentation is The Illusion of Wealth. Right.
Yes, exactly. The illusion of wealth. And we're going to walk you through this exact slide deck step by step to understand this massive paradox. But first, let's define the region we're actually talking about here. The data focuses on a group called MENA plus AP.
Right. So let's break that acronym down. MEA stands for the Middle East and North Africa.
Okay.
So we're talking about a massive geographic sweep, right? From Morocco on the Atlantic, all the way across North Africa, through the Arabian Peninsula, and up into the Levant.
And then the AP part.
Yeah, so that's a relatively recent, very intentional statistical grouping by organizations like the World Bank. It adds Afghanistan and Pakistan into that regional aggregate.
Got it. But there's another really important filter on this data, right? It specifically looks at IDA and IBRD countries.
Yes, and that is a crucial distinction because, when a lot of people hear Middle East, they immediately picture, Dubai.
Right, exactly. Massive skyscrapers, sovereign wealth funds, zero tax oil states.
Exactly. But that is not what we are analyzing today. IDA stands for the International Development Association, and IBRD is the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development.
Which are basically the lending arms of the World Bank, right?
Yes. So by focusing on IBA and IBRD countries, we are intentionally excluding those ultra-high-income self-financing oil states.
Okay, so we're looking at nations that are heavily populated, developing rapidly, but still rely on global financial structures and aid.
Precisely. And the mission of our deep dive today is to understand how a region like that can generate so much surface-level cash.
While fundamentally fracturing its own society at the same time.
Yeah, it's a really stark contradiction.
So let's jump right into the macroeconomy, slide 2.
Okay, the GDP numbers.
Yeah, and visually, this slide is just a smooth 2B line graph, no clutter. And it tracks the GDP in constant 2015 US dollars.
Which means inflation has been stripped out.
Right, this is real growth. And the line climbs steadily from roughly $1.54 trillion all the way up to breaking the $2.23 trillion mark.
Which is, by any standard macroeconomic measure, a massive victory.
2.2 trillion. If you're a politician looking at that chart, you're taking a victory lap.
Absolutely. You'd think they've completely cracked the code of modern economic growth.
But then we flip to slide 3, and the designer used this very specific 100% stacked area chart.
And this is where the cracks start to show.
Yeah, because there's this wide area on the chart circled in this stark, dashed dark red line, and it highlights a gaping vulnerability.
The energy source.
Exactly. Fossil fuels, specifically oil and natural gas, have consistently accounted for an overwhelming 90% plus absolute majority of the region's electricity production.
Over 90%. You have to think about what an economy actually is. It's an engine, right? It turns energy into value.
Right.
And this data shows that this $2.2 trillion engine is monolithic. It is not diversified at all. It runs almost entirely on non-renewable resources.
It's basically tethered to a single, highly volatile planetary resource.
Yeah, they aren't really generating wealth through, innovation or advanced manufacturing.
They're just extracting it.
Exactly. They are liquidating a finite asset that took millions of years to form, and they're calling that revenue income.
It kind of reminds me of, picture a bodybuilder, right?
Okay.
You see this guy on stage, and his right arm is just unbelievably massive, veins popping, lifting heavy weights. That giant arm is the $2.2 trillion GDP.
It looks incredibly strong on the surface.
Right, but then you look closer and you realize he has literally never worked out any other part of his body. He totally skipped leg day his entire life.
Right, right.
And his heart and lungs are actively failing because they're under so much strain, just pumping blood to that one massive arm.
That is a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
Because if he trips, the whole body comes crashing down. There's zero structural balance.
And that leads to this huge existential question for the region. What happens when the global energy market shifts?
Which it is actively doing right now. Decarbonization isn't just a buzzword anymore.
Right. The biggest economies are pouring trillions into renewables.
So if electric vehicles take over, or wind and solar achieve total price dominance, that single engine stalling could wipe out the entire $2.2 trillion foundation.
Because they have nothing else to fall back on. But I mean, an economy isn't just made of oil and gas, it's driven by people.
Human capital.
Exactly. So who actually makes up this massive Men+A plus AP workforce that perfectly cues up slide 4, which is all about demographics?
And this is where the data gets really intense, because their population structure operates like a massive pressure cooker.
Yeah, visually on the slide, there's this simplified population pyramid. And it doesn't look like an aging society like Japan or Italy where it's top-heavy.
No, it's incredibly wide at the bottom.
Right, there's this gray arrow at the bottom emphasizing the base. Children aged 0 to 14 make up a staggering 34 to 44% of the total population.
Just to give you some context on that, in many advanced Western economies, that age bracket is like maybe 13 or 14%.
Wow, so here it's almost half the population.
Yeah, it's a massive youth bulge. And historically, economists will tell you a youth bulge can be an incredible demographic dividend.
Because suddenly you have millions of young, energetic people entering the workforce, starting businesses, paying taxes.
Exactly. That's what drove the Asian tiger economies in the late 20th century.
But there's always a but.
Yeah, but a youth bulge is only a dividend if you actually equip those young people with the skills to participate in a modern economy.
Which brings us to slide 5, the education paradox.
And this is arguably the most heartbreaking data point in the entire deck.
Visually, it's a contrast bar chart. On the left, you have primary school enrollment rates, which actually look pretty good.
Yeah, because for decades, the global development community just obsessed over physical access.
Right. Building schools and buying desks.
Exactly. How many kids are physically sitting in a concrete room? And the governments in this region actually did a decent job with that.
But then you look at the right side of the chart, there is a glaring dark red bar, and it measures learning poverty.
Which sits at an astounding 71.2%.
It literally has an arrow pointing to it saying over 7 out of 10 children face learning poverty. But what does that actually mean?
So learning poverty is a very specific metric. It means the adjusted share of children who cannot read and understand a simple text by the end of primary school.
So roughly age 10.
Right. Over 71% of these kids, even though they're sitting in a classroom, cannot comprehend a basic paragraph.
That is just, it's catastrophic. They built the schools, they put the kids in seats, but the actual transfer of knowledge is fundamentally broken.
Exactly. The physical infrastructure is there, but the functional education system is failing.
It's like downloading an app on your phone, right? High enrollment just means you successfully downloaded the app to your home screen.
Okay. Yeah.
The government can point at the phone and say, look, everyone has the app, but that 71% learning poverty rate means that when you actually tap the icon, the app crashes 71% of the time.
The hardware is there, but the software is completely corrupted.
Yes. And so as a listener, you have to ask yourself, what happens to a society when its largest demographic cohort enters adulthood without basic cognitive foundations?
You certainly can't train them for the modern knowledge economy.
Right. You can't teach someone advanced software engineering or complex logistics if they can't read a basic manual.
So that massive youth bulge shifts overnight from being an economic dividend into a huge societal liability.
Which leads to the obvious next question. What happens when these millions of functionally undereducated young people try to get jobs?
Well, slide 6 visualizes that harsh reality perfectly.
Yeah, it's a grouped bar chart looking at youth labor. And male youth unemployment is stubbornly high, right? Hovering between 24 and 30%.
Which is high enough to cause serious social instability on its own.
Absolutely. But then there's a dark red circle around a different metric, the female NEET rate. And it is over 51%.
We really need to unpack what NEET means here, because it's worse than standard unemployment.
Right. NEET stands for not in education, employment, or training.
Right. If you're just unemployed, the assumption is you are in the labor force, you're looking for a job, you're handing out resumes.
But NEET means you are entirely disconnected.
Exactly. You aren't learning, you aren't working, and you aren't acquiring a trade. You are functionally invisible to the macroeconomic engine.
And for young women in this region, more than half of them are in that category, over 51%.
It's a staggering waste of human potential.
And it gets worse on slide 7. There's a double-line graph tracking total adult labor force participation.
The gender chasm.
Yeah, there's a massive double-sided arrow right in the middle of the chart highlighting the gap. The top line is male participation, sitting at around 71 to 79%.
Which is relatively normal.
But the bottom line, female labor force participation, is completely flatlined at a dismal 14 to 17%.
I mean, when you just look at the raw mathematics of growth, you cannot build a modern, diversified economy while voluntarily restricting your labor pool that severely.
It's like, okay, imagine a national team trying to win the World Cup. They are going up against the best teams on the planet. But right before the game starts, the coach voluntarily orders 85% of the women's roster to sit on the bench.
Right, and they never even step onto the field.
Exactly. How can a region that is already struggling with a youth bulge and learning poverty afford to leave 85% of its women out of the workforce?
They can't. And it cascades through everything. It's not just a missing GDP number.
What do you mean?
Well, think about household income. If female participation is only 14%, almost the entire society relies on single-income households.
Oh, right. So there's no economic safety net for the family.
Exactly. If the man loses his job, the family instantly falls into poverty. And decades of global research show that when women control a portion of household income, they overwhelmingly reinvest it into their children's health and education.
So by keeping women out of the workforce, you're actually starving the next generation of human capital.
It's a vicious cycle of poverty.
Okay, I have to pause here. Because if you're listening to this, it sounds incredibly bleak. A massive youth bulge, failing schools, toxic fossil fuel dependence, and half the adult population sidelined.
It does sound like total systemic collapse.
But wait, the data isn't entirely bad. In fact, slides 8 and 9 show that these governments have pulled off some genuine historical miracles.
Yes, we have to talk about state capacity. Because in terms of infrastructure, the achievements are monumental.
Let's look at the numbers. On slide 8, urban electrification has surpassed 97%.
They basically got the lights on in every major city across a massive, difficult terrain.
And there's an upward arrow showing rural electrification rocketing up to over 92%. Plus, access to basic drinking water in cities is over 95%.
You have to give credit where it's due. Building electrical grids and water sanitation systems across the Middle East, North Africa, Afghanistan, and Pakistan.
Across deserts and mountains.
Exactly. That requires immense capital and logistical execution, and it directly caused the health miracles we see on the next slide.
Slide 9. It's a dual-axis chart. One line goes up. Life expectancy skyrocketed from just 43 years to over 71 years.
Which is one of the most profound things a state can do for its people.
And the other line drops. Mortality for children under 5 plummeted from 102 deaths per 1,000 live births.
Because when you clean up the water supply, you eliminate diseases like cholera and dysentery that kill infants.
And when you have reliable electricity, hospitals can run incubators and keep vaccines cold.
Exactly. The infrastructure directly saved millions of lives.
There's always a but.
Yeah. Slide 10 completely shifts the tone again, because this infrastructure boom wasn't magic. It had a fuel source.
Right, we have to go back to the 90% fossil fuel engine we talked about at the beginning.
The giant right arm of the bodybuilder.
Exactly.
So slide 10 flashes this stark KPI number. PM 2.5 exposure is at 45 to 51 micrograms per cubic meter.
Which vastly exceeds World Health Organization's safety standards. And there's a side box right next to it that says 132 deaths per 100,000 people are now directly linked to household and ambient air pollution.
Right. PM 2.5 refers to particulate matter so small that when you inhale it, it crosses the lung barrier and goes straight into your bloodstream.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it causes strokes, ischemic heart disease, and lung cancer.
It's just a tragic irony. They engineered their way out of childhood diseases by turning the lights on, but the massive industrial effort required to burn all that coal and heavy oil poisoned the air.
They survived childhood, but now the very air they breathe is killing them as adults.
It's like a hidden tax on their GDP growth.
And that localized environmental damage scales up, which brings us directly into the region's existential climate vulnerability.
Right, Section 5. Slide 11 shows an area chart tracking total carbon dioxide emissions, and there's a dashed arrow with a note saying, emissions have absolutely not decoupled from economic growth.
Decoupling is the holy grail of economics right now.
Right, where countries get wealthier, but their emissions actually fall.
Exactly. But in the mid plus AP region, the chain is still completely unbroken. To generate $1 of GDP, they have to pump a massive amount of carbon into the atmosphere.
They are accelerating their own emissions, which is terrifying when you look at slide 12.
The waffle chart.
Yeah, it's an icon array. Mostly dark gray icons, but a huge proportion of them are dark red, representing the population exposed to severe climate shocks.
Droughts, floods, extreme heat.
Right. They are highly vulnerable to extreme weather, yet their entire economic survival relies on accelerating the emissions that cause it.
They're essentially throwing gasoline on their own burning house.
And when extreme weather hits, like those apocalyptic floods in Pakistan, you need strong institutions to manage the crisis.
Which brings us to slide 13, governance.
And this data is rough. It shows metrics from the worldwide governance indicators for rule of law and control of corruption.
And there's a vertical dashed line representing the 50th percentile globally.
Yeah, the median benchmark. And the region is stubbornly stuck entirely on the left side of that line, below the median.
Because governance is weak and corruption is deeply embedded.
And that weak governance directly triggers the financial nightmare on slide 14.
Right, the capital flow.
The chart juxtaposes foreign direct investment, or FDI, which looks like a chaotic, volatile heartbeat monitor.
Because private foreign capital gets easily spooked.
Exactly. And then right next to it is official development assistance, or ODA, which is totally flat and persistent.
ODA is basically international aid.
So I was trying to synthesize all this, and tell me if this analogy works. It's like a family building a house in Tornado Alley. That's the climate risk, right?
Okay, I'm with you.
But they use super cheap materials because the local contractors skimmed all the good stuff off the top.
That's the systemic corruption.
Right. And then, inevitably, a tornado blows the roof off. They try to get a bank loan to rebuild, but the bank sees the terrible foundation and denies it.
Because it's a huge risk. That's the volatile FDI fleeing the region.
Exactly. So now they have no private money. Their only option is to go beg their neighbors for cash just to buy a plastic tarp to cover the house.
And that tarp is the ODA, the foreign aid. That is a brilliant way to explain it.
But you can't build a new roof with neighborly donations.
No, you can't.
Right.
And that's the terror of the situation. Without strong governance, transitioning away from that 90% fossil fuel engine is basically impossible.
Because green transitions require massive long-term private capital.
Huge amounts, like 30-year investment horizons for smart grids and solar farms. And institutional investors won't park billions of dollars there if they don't trust the courts or fear corruption.
Wow. Okay, so the diagnosis is complete. We have a wealthy facade hiding an undereducated, underemployed, climate-vulnerable reality.
It's a very fragile system.
So how do they actually fix it?
That brings us to the final slide, slide 15.
Yeah, there are no complex charts here, just a minimalist infographic. 3 sturdy pillars supporting a roof labeled Sustainable Macro Prosperity.
And the caption at the bottom reads, "The essential path to shattering the illusion of wealth."
So let's hit these 3 pillars. Pillar 1, end learning poverty to unlock youth potential. Pillar 2, empower women to close the labor gap. Pillar 3, execute a green energy transition to lower emissions and health costs.
It really summarizes the entire deep dive. The historical model was about extracting wealth from beneath the ground.
Oil and gas.
Right. But the data proves that model has reached its limit. To survive the 21st century, they have to pivot entirely to investing in the wealth walking above the ground.
Human capital.
Yes.
But it looks so elegantly simple on the slide. 3 neat little pillars. I feel like you can't just pick one, right? Like you can't just build solar panels and ignore the schools.
Absolutely not. They are deeply, inherently intertwined. It's a package deal.
How so?
Well, think about it. You want to build a massive green energy grid? You need thousands of advanced electrical engineers and software developers.
Right. But you can't source that domestic workforce if 71% of your youth couldn't read a basic paragraph at age 10.
Oh, wow. So you have to fix the learning poverty just to have the brains to build the green grid?
Exactly. And even if you fix the schools, you still need to double your economic capacity to replace the oil revenue.
Which you mathematically cannot do if 85% of your women are benched from the workforce.
Exactly. Empowering women fills the labor gap, generates more household income, which broadens the tax base, which the government then uses to fund the schools that cure the learning poverty.
It's a complete loop. They all feed into each other.
Yeah. But achieving it requires a total redesign of the region's social contract, shifting from state-led resource handouts to actually empowering individual citizens.
Which is a monumental task, but it's the only way out.
It really is.
I want to turn back to you, the listener, for a second, because even if you don't live in the Minimay plus AP region, this data tells a really universal story.
Yeah, it's about the danger of relying on a single metric. Exactly. How often do we do this? We look at a company's revenue or a country's GDP or even just our own bank account balances, and we assume everything is fine.
Because the line is going up.
Right, but we completely ignore the underlying decay. Are we exhausting our own human capital? Is our local environment degrading?
We get blinded by the dashboard.
So we want to leave you with a lingering question to mull over. If a region's GDP can double, if the wealth is supposedly exploding,
But the environment is degrading, half the population is sidelined, and the youth aren't learning.
right, is gross domestic product actually measuring wealth? Or is it just measuring the speed at which a society is burning through its own future?
That's the real question.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the numbers. Remember, always look past the surface of the charts.
See you next time.